Hey guys, this is Mrs. Mindy, and today I'm going to talk to you about physical and chemical change. So, physical change happens when molecules change how they interact with each other. So, no bonds are made or broken. So, as an example, the difference between ice and water. So, in ice, the water molecules just kind of go together in these little hexagons. They just relate to each other in a different way. When it's liquid water, then the molecules are just kind of like bumping along past each other and wiggling around, and they're not locked into a certain shape. Okay, but they're not bonded, they're just kind of lightly connected to each other here because they have lower energy. So they go into this orientation. Now, in chemical change, the molecules themselves change into something new. So it's not just how the molecules interact with each other, it's the molecules themselves change. So this means there's making or breaking of chemical bonds. So, as an example, also with water, when water can be made out of hydrogen gas, so that's these little molecules of hydrogen right here, where it's two hydrogens stuck together. And if you add an oxygen molecule, so an oxygen molecule like the oxygen in the air, it's two oxygen atoms stuck together. So when those interact, they form water, water molecules. So the bond between the two oxygens got broken, the bond between the two hydrogen molecules got broken, and they scramble around and rearrange so that now the oxygen molecules are each stuck to two hydrogen molecules. Okay, and so now it's water. So it's a completely different thing, completely different substance. It has different ways that it behaves, because certainly you can't breathe in water nicely. Well, you do, the water, little water vapor, but not like oxygen. You can't use water for the things that oxygen does, like to breathe and power your cells. Okay, so making or breaking bonds, that's the big thing. That's what makes it chemical change. There are some clues when you observe a chemical change because we can't usually see molecules. We see stuff on our human scale. So these are human scale clues that if you see a change, it's chemical change. Now, these are not like 100% because the universe is complex and sometimes things you can get different, you can see the same thing, but due to different causes. Okay, so but the color change is a pretty good one, and by color change I mean beyond, like if you were mixing paints or something, blue plus yellow equals green. I'm not going to call that a chemical change. That's just the same things. The blue and the yellow are still in the liquid, but if it's something like clear plus clear equals orange, that's a color change. Or purple plus yellow equals green. Okay, so stuff like that. Now, I can't show you the video that I would show you in person, but it is linked in the Canvas where you can see this video of lots of nice color change. And it's actually a reaction that we're going to do in class later. Another clue, so clue number 2, that it's a chemical change. Remember, these are clues. They're not like 100%, but the more clues you have, the more you believe that that's true. Okay, so is there a gas released? And gas released, that can be a smell. So like when you smell something burning, like when you make toast, you get that smell of toast that is different than the smell of bread. And so that's a signal that something different has happened. Some bonds were made or broken to make a new substance, and that substance is what you are smelling. So gas release can be a new smell. It can also be bubbling. So if something bubbles, then that's a signal that gas is being produced. But, there are other reasons that we know that things bubble. So, like when you pop into a glass and it bubbles, that's not a chemical change. That's just dissolved gases that were there coming out. Or when you boil water, that's not a chemical change. The bubbling is just from, again, gas that was in the water being released, or the water changing from liquid to gas underneath and really expanding because gaseous water is way bigger. It takes up a lot more space um, than liquid water. Okay, there's also a video of this, so you can check that out later. And it's cool. It's pretty. Okay, so this is kind of a weird one that people don't talk about except in chemistry, and that's a precipitate. Now, you may remember precipitate from talking about weather at some time in your career, where that and a precipitation is when uh, something falls out of the sky. Okay, so it's going from saying like there's a cloud or there's water vapor, but then it precipitates out as rain or snow or hail. So if you think of that thing like going from uh, there, it goes from sort of gas to liquid or gas to solid. And usually when we do precipitate in a chemistry lab, it's going to be we mix two liquids and we get a solid. Okay, and so that's how we know a new substance has been formed. Bonds have been made or broken because we get a solid. Now, when you mix things and you get a solid in like a test tube or the solid isn't going to just form into like a chunk all of a sudden because things don't happen on the human scale. They happen on the molecular scale. So it's going to be little tiny pieces of solid. And how we can see that with our eyes is if it goes from a clear liquid to an opaque liquid, because opaque means little tiny chunks of solid suspended in the water. Okay, so check this out in the video too in Canvas. So that's a precipitate. Ooh, and I can't go forward. There we go. And this is just, it's another, there's a second one. And this one's especially pretty because you get some weird precipitates. Lots. So I didn't want to just give you one example of precipitates because it's really strange. So it can change color and you get a precipitate out. This one here has happened, excuse me, whoops. This one has happened so fast that it actually makes this sort of shell of the solid precipitate around. So it's like a kind of like a little chemical balloon that formed around the one liquid right where it touches the other liquid. So that's pretty cool. All right, going on. Okay, number 4 clue that it's a chemical change. And you know, when I number stuff like that, I would strongly recommend that you write that down in your notes because that's the thing you're going to have to know later. So number 4, a change in energy. And how we know that that happened is the thing gets hotter or colder, or in extreme cases, it gives off light because that's a change in energy. So um, if something, and when I mean gets hotter, I don't mean like, oh, I heated it up and something happened. No, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the mixture by itself gets hotter or colder. Okay, so by itself, it gets hotter or colder, but when you mix these two things together. Okay, and actually every reaction does this a little bit, but sometimes it's really noticeable and sometimes it's not so noticeable. All right, so make sure you check out this video where they're going to put a blackish purplish powder together with some clear drops of something and it catches on fire by itself. That's how hot it gets. Okay. Okay, so summing up, physical changes mean that matter changes form, but not chemical identity. By chemical identity, I mean like what is the molecule? What do the molecules look like? Okay, so it changes form. It can change the size. It can change, so like the size of the pieces, if you bend it, if you flatten it, things like that, that's a physical change. So like, also state changes. So changes of state, like going from solid to liquid, liquid to gas, gas to solid, anything like that. So melting ice, that's a physical change. Chopping wood, that's a physical change. You're just changing the size of the pieces. Mixing marbles because you're just kind of like changing their orientation relative to each other. Shredding paper, you're just changing the size of the pieces. Every little piece of paper has the same properties as the big piece of paper. It's just smaller pieces. Okay, now chemical changes changed intrinsically, like what it is changing it on a molecular scale. And some examples are burning wood. So if you're burning the wood, it's clearly got a big energy change. It gives off a smell. The smell of burning wood is definitely different than the smell of just regular not burning wood. And also, what happens to the wood? It changes color. It changes a lot of things. Changes texture. Changes all kinds of stuff. Okay, a rotting banana, that changes too. It changes color. It gives off a different smell. So it's changing from how it was, delicious, yummy banana to like this weird mush. Okay, mixing vinegar and baking soda. So that when it bubbles up, it gives off a gas. Okay, so that's a new material that was made is in the bubbles, it's carbon dioxide. And fireworks. So if there's a change in color, sometimes there's a lot of energy given off as light, and then the noise from the fireworks, that's energy too. Okay, so now we're going to go through some examples and you tell me. Oh, well, okay, one more. So changes in the size of physical pieces is physical change. Size, shape, or state, that's physical change. Changes in smell or color, giving a precipitate, things like that, like those four things that we just went over, that's chemical change. All right, so now you think about these, and if we were together, I would, give you one, and we would talk about each one. But I'll just give pauses in here for you to think about it. So frying eggs. Think about what happens when you fry an egg, and if that's chemical or physical change. Well, frying eggs is chemical change, and you can tell because there's a change in color. The clear of the white of the egg turns white, so that's a change. Um, Even the yolk gets a little bit different color than it is when it's raw. It doesn't change as much as the clear to opaque. It gives off a different smell. And most things of cooking, just as a hint, most things of cooking are chemical change. Not everything. Like you make a salad, that's not chemical change because you're just chopping it up into pieces. But most other things. Okay. Making toast. Well, that's a chemical change. That was one of our examples. But there's a change in color from bread colored to toast colored. There's a change, there's a smell given off that's different. So that's toast. Cracking eggs. What do you think about that? Well, cracking eggs is physical change because you're just breaking the pieces. You're separating out different parts one from another, but it doesn't really change yet. It doesn't change until you cook it. Slicing bread, that's physical change, okay? Because you're just cutting it into smaller pieces. You've got a big piece of bread and then you cut it. It's still bread after you cut it. Lighting a match. Okay, lighting a match is chemical change. Any fire, any burning is chemical change. You can tell because the lit match or the after it's burned is a different color than before. It gives off a lot of energy in heat and light of the flame, and there's certainly a different smell. When you strike a match, there's that kind of like little sulfur smell. Roasting marshmallows. That is chemical change because it goes from being the white marshmallow to being a kind of toasty brown or black, depending on how you like it. I like to burn it on the outside, and then it's like sort of slightly bitter on the outside and then sweet on the inside. That's what I like. Okay, again, most cooking is going to be chemical change. That's why we cook, because we get different molecules that we like the taste of. It breaks down other molecules and makes it easier to digest. That's why we do it. Nails rusting, so rusty nails, that's going to be a chemical change because when it rusts, it changes color and it changes the properties too. It goes from holding together to like flaking off and being powdery. Ice melting. Ice melting is a change in state. So that is just physical change. The molecules are the same whether it's water or ice. It's just the relationship between the molecules that changes. Glass breaking. Glass breaking is physical change. So it's just changing the size of the pieces. All right, I'm going to go through a little bit faster now for these. Boiling water is physical change. Even though it's boiling, even though it may be bubbling, it's still just physical change because we can get the steam back from here. If we cool it down, it's just water again. So that's how we know that it's still just water molecules. Making lemonade. Making lemonade is just physical change. You're just taking components and mixing them together. Even when you dissolve the sugar, it's still sugar molecules individually. It's just made into smaller pieces of sugar. Fewer sugar molecules stuck together when it's dissolved in the water. Baking a cake. Baking a cake is chemical change because the cake batter is very different. It has different properties than the baked cake. It has a different smell. You can't easily go backwards either from that. Like you can't, it's not like the boiling water. You can change it back into the water easily, from steam. Baking a cake, you can't make it back into batter again by just like cooling it down. Like you heated it up to make it a cake. And if you cool it down, it's still cake. So that's a chemical change. Mowing the lawn. Now, mowing the lawn is a physical change because you're just cutting pieces. It does give off a smell, but that's because you're breaking open the cells of the plant and releasing those chemicals that were inside, and that's what you're smelling. So remember those four clues, they're not absolute proof. They're just clues of like maybe, maybe not. Fireworks exploding. For fireworks, it's giving off a different color. It's giving off a noise, which is energy. It's giving off light, which is energy. If you touched it, it'd be giving off heat too. So fireworks exploding is chemical change. Digesting food. Digesting food is chemical change. So we break down the food, and this is kind of weird, but if you think about it, it is true. So if you eat the food, all the things that you ate yesterday, your body broke them down into the individual molecules and is now reassembling them into you, into you. So that food that you ate, I ate some rice and some eggs yesterday. So those have been broken down into their amino acids and their carbohydrates, their fats, and rearranged into different molecules to make me. Okay, or I burned them up to use for energy. And I literally burn them up. It doesn't go flames, but it's the same exact reaction. Okay, key point to remember. Chemical change is making or breaking molecules. So structures made of atoms. So making or breaking bonds. All right. So like when you burn methane, it's methane plus oxygen turns into carbon dioxide and water. Okay, it makes new molecules. It breaks the old molecules. Okay, here's another example of some other things. And if you notice, all the same atoms are still there. They're just like taken apart and put together in new combinations. But every single atom is still there. Okay? We'll talk more about that later. Okay, guys, that's it. Don't forget to turn your notes in, and I will see you next time.